Hey yo, what's up everybody? Today we're talking about Wuthering Waves Chapter 4 Act 3 and giving my thoughts after having played the quest. Of course, just like other videos in this particular style, this isn't a lore recap or a review of the entire story, it's just my thoughts on it. And just by nature of what this is, there will be some recapping involved, but this isn't like a full recap. So if you're looking for that, you may have to wait a little bit. I will be coming out with a recap on this story. So with that being said, spoilers. Duh. Hey yo. That quest was long as hell though, right? But I digress. There were a number of things I found interesting about this quest. And one of the things it sets up is it sets up our journey to Mengzhou. And it gives us more of a reason to go there, more of a reason to want to know about Mengzhou. Like, why is it like that? And I know this bit about Mengzhou was mentioned to a lesser degree in previous acts, but I think in this act, they kind of made a point to like draw attention to the fact that Mengzhou has been absent during all of this. And obviously so. No aid, no reinforcements, and no response. And so that's pretty much how our journey starts off during this quest. We meet up with Cece, and she kind of brings that to our attention because she's leaving to go back to Mengzhou to kind of like figure out what's going on. During this quest, we get an interesting theme, this reoccurring idea throughout the entirety of this quest. And that theme is man versus machine, simulacra versus the real, AI versus humanity. And we see this manifested through the character Muyu and basically his vision for the people. Muyu creates a hyper reality. He wants to use technology, so much so that he wants to embed the human spirit, their frequencies, inside of, well, machines. He wants these people as machines to continue building society and humanity. But at that point, it isn't really humanity. Like, these people and their frequencies essentially have lost all the desires that they had. And that's one of the key things about frequencies in the world of Wuthering Waves. Frequencies kind of linger based on their obsession. And to take that away kind of takes away everything that is left of their essence. There was one girl saying that she remembers the food from her hometown and she wants to go back there because hopefully she can somehow taste again and find a desire for food again. We have people who had different passions that no longer are relevant to them because they no longer feel anything towards them, which is kind of sad. When you think about just the real world, people are working and essentially becoming machines in a way. And then also this idea that humanity can evolve into machine, it's kind of like an experiment. And we think about just how AI is used in the current era. It's used in a way that kind of replaces human. It replaces a part of us. It replaces our creativity. It replaces our passion. It replaces, our talents. And it's an experiment because, well, just like in this particular act, we don't know the ramifications of some of the things that we're doing. We don't know how all these things will affect the human psyche and the development of our youth and children until years down the road. They're currently finding now that some of these things are having pretty terrible effects over people, but we didn't know that from the beginning. And so that's kind of like what Muyu is doing to a degree. The only difference is his is a lot worse. Like, he's just taking what's left of people and then experimenting on that. And they have no say in this. Kind of like how we don't have a say over whether or not AI gets integrated into our platforms, into our music, into the things that we see all around us, down to the apps that we use on our phones. Some of these apps are now integrating AI into them, even though that's not what people wanted. Anyway, let me step off the soapbox and continue talking more about this story because I do think it has a lot of other interesting components. The villain Muyu was kind of interesting because, and I say was because, well, I mean, if you played the quest, some of you may not have played the quest but watch this video anyway, even though the spoiler warning was there, you know that he dies twice. Muyu was an interesting villain. He was interesting for a lot of different reasons. And one of those reasons was the fact that we got a chance to see what he had to offer. We got a chance to see what his goal was, his principles were. His methodology might be something that you disagree with, but you can at least kind of see where he's going and see what his desires are. And that says something about some of the other villains. We have no idea what it is they desire and what it is they're pressing towards. I mean, you could say that the other villains want to evolve humanity, but I don't really feel like it's that important to them in comparison. Like Muyu talked about what he wanted. It was kind of on the front street for everybody to see what it is that he wanted and his ideals. I don't necessarily feel it's as clear for some of these other villains. So it makes him a more relatable and understandable villain than some of the others, even though we've seen them way more frequently. Yeah, I really like Muyu for that reason. And another reason is the fact that he spoke so plainly and clearly, and he was so easy to understand. And in a game like this, where characters talk in some of the most convoluted, poetic styled ways, where it's almost like fantasy writing, but even if you were to go to a popular, fantasy media, they still don't speak as convoluted as how they speak in some of these games. And I say games because it's not just this game, but other games in this genre. A lot of the characters have this kind of fantasy speak where it's kind of difficult. You kind of have to listen with a different kind of ear. If you go in listening with a normal ear, you're not going to be able to pick up what they're saying a lot of times, just because they say things that are it's oddly phrased. And I don't know why that is. It could be just an artifact of translation, but either way, things are oddly worded from time to time, or a lot of times. But that brings me to one of the interesting things about Muyu's dialogue. He gave us a breadcrumb into Rover. And it gave us something to think about that we hadn't had to think about in quite some time. During Chapter 4, Act 2, Muyu says, "And you, I wonder where you picked up that sickening habit of playing human." That is an interesting line. And he said so much in what seems to be somewhat of a throwaway line. Muyu essentially gave us the perspective that Rover is not at all who they think they are, who others think they are, and who we as the player might perceive them to be, which is kind of mind-blowing. It recontextualizes what we know about Rover, and it asks the question, what really is Rover? Is Rover a biological being? Are they synthetic? Is Rover AI? Is Rover like a robot running a program? When Rover wipes their memory, is that them just resetting their programming to factory settings? This isn't to be confused with metaphorically saying when a person loses their memory, they have been reset, but a literal factory reset on who they were programmed to be. Could that be the case? I don't know, but one of the reasons Muyu was so interesting as a character is because he spoke plainly and he gave us insight that a lot of other villains and characters alike seem to have on who Rover is, but nobody is spilling the beans. Nobody is saying anything. And the only one to give us a glimpse as to who Rover is after such a long time, I mean, it's been a while, is Muyu. The only one has been Muyu in recent history of the story. We've gone through several acts. I feel like we get one of these very seldomly. We get some of these occasionally throughout the story. We got one when we found Rover was an adoptive father. We got one when we found Rover was arbiter and had the authority over the Sentinels. We get them here and there, but this one is a bombshell, and we got this just now. And so through Muyu, Rover just became a lot more interesting. So in a lot of ways, it's a shame that Muyu is no longer around. At the same time, it does bring on a welcomed practice of villains actually being something that can be defeated. Because as we've seen so far, none of them have really been defeated. None of them have really died. Even the Thrnodians are only temporarily defeated. So that brings another layer and another interesting bit to this story. And throughout all of the things that are occurring, you kind of have Qin in the background. And Sentinel Hsin is kind of like Mengzhou in a way. Like, I mean, I guess she's relevant, but she's also absent in a way. And Rover and Qingjiao was ready to throw them hands at Qin. You know, they're like, yo, what are you doing? Your people need you. Your people need your presence. They need your power. And you've abandoned them. And we do see, like, she starts glitching out. I'm just like, wait. Sentinel Hsin, you were not glitching out before. I ain't see a single glitch until now. Hey, you're gonna have to stop that. Have some accountability for your actions. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. But it will be interesting to see what could cause Sentinel Hsin to somehow take this hands-off approach. One of the things that she did put in place, though, were the Celestials, which I kind of find odd. I'm not a big fan of the naming scheme for these characters. Mainly just because I feel like it's a waste in a story, in a world where beings come from beyond the stars, kind of like Rover. In fact, our journey begins amongst the stars. And so the term celestial could be used for a being of that status, something that is beyond, because that's what celestial means. It means of the heavens, the celestial bodies, the stars, the planets. And to be like, yeah, these are kind of like technical architects of our society. And it's like, okay, all right, I guess they are foundational into building things, I guess. The point is, we get an explanation of what these things are. And these celestials are essentially the people who originally built Shuangfeng Hold. But these people never stopped existing. Essentially, they started living in the system, and they continued to maintain Shuangfeng Hold in an IT sense from the inside. This quest also was interesting because we got to see a lot of different characters that we've met over the various patches, and characters that are also on the horizon to come. Among those that stick out in my head the most, of course, are Jinggran and Qingjiao. I mean, of course, those two are the new characters of this patch, but we also had Yinlin make a return. Buling was referenced, not really seen in the quest, but referenced. We also had a new Fractidus member named Belanophora, which is an interesting name, and maybe we'll dive into that in a separate video. But that's kind of a name that sticks to your, sticks in your mind. It kind of sticks out, especially when you know what this plant kind of is. It kind of like represents what the Fractidus is to a degree. Either way, we also saw another character swimming, and there were a number of other things that I liked too. We didn't get much gameplay in this quest. I will get back to that. We got a little bit though, and I will get back to a number of different things that I kind of disliked a little bit later. Now, I like the new sword flight mechanic. I thought that was super cool. I wish we can kind of like freely roam with it, but I guess that's not really the case. We can't freely do it. However, they have set up different points in the game for us to do it. Now, I was under the impression that we couldn't do it after that point with Rover because I kept experiencing these glitches every time I tried to go to a sword flight point. It didn't work for me. And then when it did work, sometimes it would work incorrectly, or sometimes the sword flight point would disappear, or sometimes my character would just spin around in a circle. So I've experienced a lot of bugs with that, but I kind of wish Rover could do it. And I know they kind of want to have this mechanic specific to Qingjiao because they want to, sell you the character. But I mean, there are other reasons why a person would pull for Qingjiao. So you don't have to hold cool stuff behind a paywall. Just like give it to Rover at least. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on that. But the music and set design were really good. I like the interesting levels in the Inner Sanctum, where you had the Earth level, the Heaven level, and the Human realm. It was just really cool seeing all these mountains and stuff like zoom past as you're on top of these ships. I wish you can go back to those areas. I don't know if they'll ever make it where you can go back, but I did think it was really cool. Going back to the characters, it was really cool being able to actually play as characters that I don't have, because I'm planning to get Qingjiao, but I don't have her yet. Hopefully we'll get her. Hopefully. But it was cool playing Jingran before its release. Now, let's go back to some of the criticisms I have. My first thought after finishing this act was, man, bruh, that was long as fuck. That was hella long. It took me all day to get through this quest. It took me all day. I mean, practically all day, not literally all day, but it took a whole day to play through. And I know that these quests, you don't have to play them front to back in one sitting. That's not something that you're required to do. I kind of do that because, I need to put out videos. But if a person wanted to play through the entire quest, entire story, yeah, it was just a lot if you wanted to do so. And I think there are some things that can make that playthrough better. If they wanted to make these very long quests, here's some things they could do to make that experience a lot more enjoyable. There are 2 things, possibly 3 things that they could do to make this more enjoyable. One of those things is stopping points. And if these quests are going to continue to be as long as they are, where they're about almost 6 hours long, there needs to be obvious stopping points that a person can take a break, or they could just do something different in game. There needs to be stopping points. And I don't mean, oh, well, the action allowed you to walk around, so I guess you're free. I mean, like, there's a rising action, a climax, and a falling action. And during that falling action, you can kind of like take a breather. Another thing they could do is add more action. This is an action-adventure RPG game, and it's severely lacking in action when it comes to these quests. And I've been talking about this for a while, but I really think this quest is a perfect example of how not to do these long quests. I mean, we're talking about the runtime. That's the equivalent of an entire season of a Netflix show. Like, maybe the entirety of Cyberpunk Edgerunners could be watched during the playtime of this quest. I mean, this is the same length as several episodes of your favorite anime or TV show. It's the runtime of multiple feature-length films. And despite all of this, there's not enough action to keep an action fan entertained. And that's even with me enjoying the base story of the game and enjoying the story they're trying to tell in this act. It's just that there isn't enough action to reinvigorate the story at various points. It's just not. Think about your favorite anime, series, or TV show. There might be at least one major fight or shootout per episode. And maybe there's smaller skirmishes in the same episode as well. And with the average episode being 20 minutes, that means that at least, bare minimum, every 20 minutes, there needs to be something action-based that's happening. And action doesn't necessarily mean explosions and gunfire. It could just mean a rising tension. They need to add tension and action, and there really isn't that. It's really not there. Third component that they could add to make these very long quests even more enjoyable is gameplay. Now, this used to be a game that I complimented them on how much they injected gameplay into the story playthrough compared to some of its contemporaries in the space. But I can't really make that compliment anymore, at least not with this quest. You guys remember the time we had quests where you had to solve puzzles, open doors, fight mini bosses, maybe find things using the sensor mechanic? Quests where we had to do a little bit of parkour. I mean, some of that is still present, but it's not nearly enough, man. For a 6-hour quest and for it to only be roughly probably around, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes of gameplay, it's just not enough, man. At that point, it's not a game. We're playing a game. Let's remember that. It's a game with a story. The story is supposed to contextualize the gameplay. It's supposed to make the characters more interesting and relatable, and what they do have meaning. But it's also supposed to be fun. And I didn't really have a lot of fun playing this quest, I gotta be honest. And with all the criticisms I levied, I have to say that I did enjoy the baseline story of this quest, but I do feel like it could have been done a bit better. Anyways, folks, those are my thoughts when it comes to Chapter 4, Act 3 of Wuthering Waves. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. That is all I have for you guys today, and until next time, Waves.